All right, welcome everyone back to Lugnut TV. Quick recording sessions back to back for Katie and myself. That is my co-host here, Katie Dugas. Can you say hi?
Hi, Katie.
As always, here we go again, stealing you away for a little bit of information here on Loose Lugnuts Racing. It's only been a few days, but let's backtrack a little bit here to this past Thursday. We've started the preseason here, short track racing, more or less, at New Hampshire. Trucks was a little bit of a doozy, somewhat high caution rate, getting in there. Kevin Winter winning that race, so it was a start. We're building up to it. Katie, you got anything remembering back to that?
I know it was, pretty difficult for a lot of these guys. And I think the hardest thing was, adjusting back to a short track. We're bringing in a lot of new drivers right now, testing out to see, who's going to be the best fit for our league. So they're not judging you on your standings or how you finish. It's more or less how you interact with, your teammates and drivers and how committed you're going to be to the league itself.
Yeah, that I mean, there's no points, even though it's showing on the iRacing side of things. But no points. You got that going on for Thursday's trucks. Kevin Winter, like I said, high caution. But what Katie said was more important compared to what I'm saying about cautions. Fitting in racecraft, and John Hedrick has been preaching it over the Facebook page, as always. The Facebook page at Loose Lugnuts Racing League is the best way to get information. Link will be in description for that, along with all the other ones we'll go over here this evening. We move on past Thursday. So in my last podcast, I said I seen a lot of guys that I've seen before with high amounts of incidents, and even some new guys with high amounts of incidents. We need to find a balance with that early on. I think going into uh, Texas week this week coming up will help with that. But before we jump to that, Saturday, Katie, well, let's at least get it from your end because I know Top is pretty darn excited.
That he was. I honestly don't know who was more excited, him or Brandon Thornhill. And I know Brandon Murray was out there rooting pretty loud too, but I think Thornhill actually got the most excited out of anybody because he, at that very end on the last turn, decided he was going to try to drive Top's car and drove straight into the pit wall. So he was screaming for him. First Lugnuts win, even though it's preseason, was still huge for this house.
Yeah, and as a guy that I have preseason wins also. I think that eventually got added to the history of loose lug nuts wins. But at the same time, just getting over that hump is what's the most difficult. Next up for Top, though, has to be a points win, and he did really well consistently at least during the summer series. So moving forward, we talked about it too. He's got a new PC now. He's got the new wheel. Let's talk about the new wheel he's actually playing around in the background with right now.
He is. You know, a lot of these guys probably feel the same way. If you're going to race and try to be competitive in this, you've got to stay on top of things, which means equipment, same way as a regular race car. So, yeah, he's pretty excited about that. His new pedals will be coming in shortly. So, I hate to say it, but he might be a force to be reckoned with.
Well, that's always good. We always need new and strengthening competition. That's what it's all about each season is recognizing new people. We've seen our fair share of rookies and Xfinity going to Top on Saturday at New Hampshire. Less caution, still the same high incidence though. But last night was a work towards improvement in the Cup car. Viewing that race from a statistical point, cautions really just came at the end, and yeah, the guy that was fastest most of the race won the race, obviously, James Lehman. But fast times ran at the end of the race, is how it went.
That it did. I mean, there were a few, small cautions through the mid pack of the race. There was one, I believe, right at the beginning, but a lot of it was just more or less racing incidents. But, talking about that consistency and how much are you going to pour into this? We saw a lot of guys, and I mean a lot of guys with tore up race cars. I know Jeff Merck was one of them. Andrew Fesden was one. They ran with the whole front end busted off their car and just ran down low. Let all of your regular racers stay pretty much up around the top side, but just staying consistent and making those laps and not just I'll put it blunt. If somebody trashes your car, I mean, do you throw it down and exit the room, or do you stay in there and try to make a couple laps? If you only have 3 minutes of repairs, do you try to make those repairs? That's what our admins are looking for right now in this preseason. And I mean, I can't stress that enough. And I'm sure it's going to be the same thing for admins, for Jeff, anybody. I mean, just show us that, you're giving it your all, regardless whether it's a win or a 20th place finish, just that you can be consistent.
Yep, that's what it's about, consistency. And the car count was pretty darn high on Sunday evening too. I believe I saw 35 drivers log in. Around 30 of them take the green flag. Obviously, we didn't finish that many, but good car count. The certain drivers out there, I will say again, if they're damaged and they quit, I understand it's preseason and maybe you're not wanting to get wrapped up too much, but at the same point, uh, thank you for showing up, but you gotta drive like you mean it sometimes, and uh, not naming names out there. I just hope those drivers uh, get with it come the new season. So that is our asphalt so far. We got at the time of recording, we still got South Boston. We talked about that on the last podcast. That'll be coming up. Staggering these podcasts, from the time you hear them from the time we recording them due to traveling plans. I got to go watch my wife get promoted and pinned to chief. So congrats to her on that and the rest of the Chiefs out there this season. And that'll be fun. But Pit Pass, Katie Dugas here with us. What do you got coming up this week with Pit Pass?
Oh, like I said, there's always something going on at Pit Pass. I had a really long interview with a bigger name in the iRacing community, and some people who run VLR might not know it, but Jeff Brown with iRacing iFlag actually took about 2.5 hours the other day and sat and talked to me about his product, but it's more or less a sponsorship standpoint. I listened to him tell me about how 70% of what he makes off of his profit goes right back into iRacing. And sitting back as somebody who watches this avidly, that shows a lot of respect. And like I said, I'm trying to give people the whole aspect, not just as a driver wife, not just as a broadcaster, not just as somebody who sits and watches, but you kind of get a feel for everything that's going on, what goes into these big races, what goes into the league itself. So, like I said, I just want to give people the idea of it's really more than just a video game.
Yeah, and we talk about the sponsors and what it does, and it actually helps. And uh, before we go into our lengthy part of the conversation here this evening, our sponsors coming up, Thursday Night Trucks will be Support Our Troops, always with Pad TNT. Pad will always be recognized there, but Support Our Troops trucks, Pit Pass there with the Xfinity Series. And then our Cup Series, which will be our flagship, will be with Abruzzi Racewear USA. Their link will be in the description. Abruzzi USA, as it sounds, .com. They do racewear, obviously gloves, boots. I think they've tried to get into the sim seats, but if you're one of those hardcore racers out there and you like the feel of your racing boots on the pedals versus what you can with boots and shoes, and some people race barefoot. You get the picture.
Not naming names.
Not naming names out there, but yeah. So you got all that going on, and it's a big thing because some of those sponsors out there actually contribute into what we're able to see and view on ASN, partnered there with ASN uh, this coming season. So they help out with the cost of that. And as always, our drivers never had to pay a dime. Any donations helpful, but beyond that, all of it's set up by the admins, mostly just John Hedrick. So it's out there. people helping, donating. We got those sponsors who mentioned. Go check them out. Like I said, links will be in the description for Pit Pass, Abruzzi, Lugnut TV, the Facebook page, so forth. But so this week, I wanted to talk about a certain thing here that came across my board of hometown racing. We all have our hometown track where we grew up. I grew up in Manatee County, Florida, and growing up, I went to a little quarter mile, less than quarter mile, bowl of a track, DeSoto Speedway. It's still up and going, but it's changed hands quite a few times, and it's hard to get outside of the 90s. We know racing really fell off. The day that Dale died, racing really died itself too for these short tracks. Uh, it's it's still there, like I said, but it wasn't my track. I you'll always hear me mention how much I like USA International Speedway. That thing's a ghost town. Ain't nothing but some stands, and you can see the asphalt with the all cracked up, and the infield concession there. I grew up around USA International Speedway with the Hooters Pro Cup, and then there was my dirt track hometown that I've done most of my fire safety work at, East Bay Raceway Park. And it came down just the other day that they're actually going to sell off their racetrack, East Bay Raceway Park, my feel for a hometown track, in 5 years to the mining company next door. And that comes to me as a shock because I didn't have that. I know it's happened all over America, but my home track's going away. Katie, do you got a home track that you can shout out? Any state, like where you're at and where you're from?
Well, where I came from, a small town in South Louisiana. Our home track was always Baton Rouge Raceway. Donald Watson has had that place for years and years and years. And I believe he's actually in his high 70s, maybe low 80s right now. And he actually still works the track every week. He is out there all week long, has a regular daytime job, but every afternoon, every weekend, he is out there. Um, Biggest, probably well known track close to us, if it wasn't Baton Rouge, might have been Pike County right there in Mississippi, that, we used to see the World Outlaws sprints come out. And I remember going there as a kid with my dad. But, those are probably the biggest tracks by me. Now, since we're up in Wisconsin, we're actually close to the Wisconsin Minnesota line. But Cedar Lake Speedway is huge. It is a NASCAR sanctioned track up here. It is by far one of the nicest facilities I have ever been to. And, definitely can't say enough about that. But that's probably our closest that we have now.
All right. Yeah, I mean, everyone has, the tracks where they grew up, where they're at now, because, life takes you different places. But, like I said, my first track there, that little bowl of a quarter mile, DeSoto Speedway, it's changed hands many times. I'm surprised it hasn't closed down. It came close one point, but, it, like you mentioned, there was a 70-year-old guy that owned it. His kids didn't want it, and he had to sell it off. And it's changed hands again since that. And East Bay Raceway Park, that track that I feel so much for, it's 40 plus years of winter nationals. It's part of that huge speed weeks in Florida when the NASCAR drivers aren't at Daytona. They're at the local dirt tracks down there in Florida with their sponsors and their sprint car teams. We get to see Tony Stewart, Casey Kane, uh, Kenny Wallace in the modifieds, Ken Schrader on the late model side. So we've always had that, but in 5 years, I'm saying, uh, and maybe I'm processing this over the internet now with Katie here, but 5 years and my track is gone. It's going to be part of the mine. do, do you have that going on anywhere you go, Katie?
I mean, we've seen it happen a lot. I know there were some other ones in Mississippi, but in 2016, we had the worst flood incident ever in South Louisiana. I mean, we've rode out some big hurricanes down there. I can tell you, it's not a pleasant experience. But the little town that I had lived in caught on. I believe it was like 18 feet of water, and when we saw aerial shots of Baton Rouge Raceway, I mean, completely underwater. It was by far one of the most gut wrenching things. Not only do you watch your hometown, your schools, your, you know, friends' houses that you grew up in, you know, going to their grandparents, your church underwater, but to see a dirt track underwater just is by far one of the most heartbreaking things. And it wasn't long ago, you know, it was the anniversary of it on Facebook and people start to share it. And I know it's very traumatic for some people. And seeing that might be hard if you lost everything, because we had a lot of people, even in our family, lose everything. And I'll never forget, and this is, you know, kind of a high point to a low story, but Brandon Thornhill actually shared a picture and it had his sprint car sitting up on a trailer and halfway covered in water. So I mean, it definitely pulls at your heartstring, and they've come back and they've come back strong. But you know, same thing, Pike County, Mississippi. I went there as a kid, and to see the bleachers all grown up, covered in weeds, and I know they're trying to get it back open, but you know, just driving past there, it definitely pulls at your heart and says, "Man, I grew up here. What's going on?" You wish you could do more, but you know, it just goes to show you that maybe the next generation won't get to admire and enjoy somewhere like we did as a kid.
Yeah, and that's the next part of this conversation. What can we do as, workers at the track? I mean, fire safety at East Bay Raceway Park, I got paid like $20 a night. It wasn't nothing spectacular, but you got to watch some good racing from the infield. But beyond that, as fans, uh, it's really died down on our local tracks nationwide. Even NASCAR tracks, old NASCAR tracks, North Wilkesboro, it's trying to be sold at the moment. The asking price is like huge. I think it was even featured on like a ghost town episode uh, on the Hulu side that I saw. But it it's one of those weird things you see out there. Uh, is it an economy type thing that we're struggling towards? Obviously, that has some factor to play. The day that Dale died impacted racing more than we'll ever know. That entire generational fan base probably got up, you know, in their minds and said, "This ain't my racing anymore."
Well,
And
not just the day he died, but I mean, think about some of these drivers that have retired who their legacy isn't carried on. I mean, I'll be blunt. I interviewed Jeff Merck last week, and he straight up told me I don't watch as much NASCAR since Mark Martin retired. I mean, it's just you have that set in your mind of your driver that you know you're extremely passionate about, and yeah, when something happens with that driver, your interest might just fade away, and it's even possible with you know the dirt tracks, small, you know, say one of your family members may race and then they give it up. So yeah, that's just a few less people every week. And the more you pull away, yeah, it's just steady going to decline.
you mentioned that your Wisconsin area track there was NASCAR sanctioned, and it was a phenomenal facility. And I believe most of the NASCAR sanctioned tracks on the NASCAR circuit can be lumped into that category of wow, those are pretty damn nice. It's better than like going to the Red Sox stadium up there in Boston and having to piss in a trough. But beyond that, I'm saying that the facility wise, you don't got to bump elbows with every other person to get in the restroom. Concessions are more frequent, and ability to get there and not miss racing at the same time. Interaction with drivers, this is a big thing too at NASCAR sanctioned tracks. Is that what local tracks are somewhat missing? That ability to be sponsored at a higher level, and the ability to have a big name at their track consistently. Tony Stewart had to buy a track for God's sake.
Yeah. And look what Tony Stewart has done with Eldora, though. I mean, just the progress that that has made is phenomenal. But yeah, you look at somewhere like Cedar Lake, who, yes, it has the word NASCAR in front of it. So they're going to push a little bit harder. Out. let's compare apples to oranges here. You look at Cedar Lake versus Baton Rouge Speedway. Baton Rouge Speedway has a tiny little brick bathroom with 2 stalls, wooden doors, and you go to Cedar Lake and you have got air conditioned, fully heated, stall bathrooms, huge thing. But at the same time, you choose some place like that, to me, your heart and soul is, your hometown track. Same thing with small businesses. If you can buy from a small business, I believe you should over, a big competitor. Same thing with a small track. Yes, they're going to pull the bigger names, but you're going to have guys, personally, I know that go to Baton Rouge Raceway. Our 13-year-old nephew races there, 6-year-old nephew races there. It's more of a family atmosphere, and that's what you're going to see. That's where these people are going to be pouring their heart into, versus you go to a big track where it's all about the money, all about the car, all about the machine, and all about the win, versus that family atmosphere that you're really pulling for the small guys there.
Yep. Well, that's what I wanted to talk about today. I mean, like I said, I'm sharing like my little bit of a heartbreak of where I know my home track is gonna go in so many years when their contract runs up. It's gonna become part of the soul for mine, unfortunately. I think, and that's that. But you know, like Katie says, small businesses are just like small tracks. You got to go out and you got to support them the best you can, if you can. If not, they're going to inevitably run down the way of USA International Speedway and many other tracks alike. I think uh, it's good to note, good to stop and discuss it. I think it was a good discussion for today. In fact, if you're listening to this far, on the Facebook page side of things, if you can, post up your home track or the track that you would go to in your area, or your favorite NASCAR track that may no longer be there, or the one that you go to every year. I know like the Covingtons try to go to Daytona or Charlotte in that matter. I used to go to Homestead once a year, so there's that. You know, we got a ton of racing, like I said, coming up here at Loose Lugnuts. Texas week coming up. By the time I get back, we'll be through and on to Talladega. So, hope everyone has a great Texas week. Katie, any final thoughts before we shut this podcast down?
Yeah, one, the support our troops thing on Thursday night. This coming week is going to be 9/11. But in the words of Jeff Merck, we always put these guys first. So I commend your wife. Anybody fighting for us overseas, here in the States, I've got to say, first responders, you guys have all of our respect. And, I know I personally pray for you daily. That's going to continue. So take a second, 9/11, just remember that, you might think of where you were, what happened, you know, don't forget. Also, it's still at USA Friday Night American Thunder Super Late Model Series. Last week we did have another winner at Eldora. So maybe this week at USA we have a few more pro names show up, shake things up. We've had a different winner every week. So curious to see what's going to happen for Friday for sure.
All right. That was final thoughts from Katie. I hope everyone's attending what they can here as we, gear into the second week of preseason, ever slowly approaching the winter long season and the points. Now, we'll talk to everyone next time. Like I said, stay interactive within the Facebook page. That's your best information. We'll have all the links in the description of the YouTube here for the podcast. Click on those if you want. Take you to Pit Pass, a Bruzy, the Facebook page, the iRacing portal side of things if you need to sign up with Loose Lug Nuts Racing. Till next time, everyone, stay safe.